be viewing these, so if it's valuable to them, then fantastic. Kind of the game plan makes sense?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you for verbally saying back. I actually heard you. Hey. Yeah, so I'm going to take a big deep breath. Hopefully just let what just go through, kind of moving it past. But I set out some of the prompts that we were thinking about, and that's that Susan Mendoza and I were thinking about. Obviously, we can address these points. If there are other things that people want to address, please do not hesitate. For the most part, I'll probably be leading the verbal conversation, and Susan will be leading the chat conversation that may emerge. In whichever way you are more comfortable or more interested, please, again, don't hesitate to pursue those different angles. For those who have their backgrounds, thank you for the backgrounds. It actually kind of looks nice. Jealous of the skiing, definitely want to go to mountains. And I like books, but I'm kind of getting a little bored with my book. So maybe we'll have a little more flair later. But one of the questions that Susan and I have really been sort of grappling with, and I'm sure this is true for everybody, is, why should we be doing some of these things? And a good example is, why should we be trying to support, advocate, maintain programs that, in this point in time, these summer research programs, these student research programs that maybe are even trying to continue right now? What are your all's thoughts for, under what conditions should we be maintaining them? Where should we be pursuing our efforts, and why these activities might be valuable and important even in this climate?
Well, let me jump in. I've got a really small program, usually fund under 10 per summer, but I just don't want it to stop. I want it to, for the students, they want these opportunities. And so I'm in the process of I get a mix of disciplines. And so I'm composing an email this morning to go out to the lab sciences to see if if they've thought about how they might modify that proposal to make it doable if, we still don't know when the labs are going to open back up again. So that's where I'm in the process of doing.
So I'd like to say we had our policy was decided this week. So our administrators informed us yesterday that summer research can continue, but no students may be allowed to be on campus or housed on campus in the summer. And so we've traditionally had a model in the social sciences and the humanities where students tended to travel, where they weren't necessarily here, but they were still working with mentors, touching base requirement once a week. They have a slightly different mentoring plan, what the lab sciences looks like. So we're using their model and their funding scheme, which is also less cost intensive for the institution because the students get paid less and the faculty get paid less because their commitment is less than every day, all day in the lab. And that is helping the institution save money, but also continuing to support the students. And so it's at the department chairs now. It will roll out to my faculty hopefully today for them to consider what they're going to do, how they're going to recruit students, whether we're going to continue to use the existing applicant pool or go somewhere else, and how these projects are going to look, how many students they can work with, that kind of stuff. But we will be moving forth with summer research. And I think one of the most compelling arguments that I was able to use for the impacts where we built a new science building. I guess we moved in about six years ago or so. And some departments chose to shut down summer research during the summer move and others did not. And we were able to monitor the impacts over multiple years in terms of the curriculum, student skill development, and all that kind of stuff. And so I used those data to make an argument to the administration that shutting down for one summer was not just impacting a few students for one summer, but would have these sort of 3-year impacts. And that seemed to be helpful, encouraging for them. And so they went with giving us an alternative model, although scaled back.
Lance, if you have
David Solomon, Christopher Newport.
Give me 1 second, David.
Sorry.
Lance, if you have a record of that, can you please upload that as a file within the chat? Because other people may not have their own individual data that shows that impact, but may be able to use yours if this becomes an important priority for them.
Yeah, I would have to see. It's all our departmental it all comes from departmental assessment reports and sort of what was perceived as the learning outcomes by those students, and what was sort of addressed in research versus what was addressed in the curriculum, and what that kind of looked like. So I would want to get permission from the department chairs before I just started sharing some of that.
So maybe the Kerr community, if you get permission and it makes sense and you have the time.
Yeah.
David, I apologize.
That's okay, Billy. So David Solomon, Christopher Newport University. I just was able to get approval from the higher ups yesterday to virtualize our summer program. So I'm calling it Virtual Summer Scholars, which is our Summer Scholars is our program. I sent out a long, detailed email to all the faculty mentors this morning, along with a survey, asking them to give sort of final approval for moving forward in this way. And also was in touch with the students this morning with also a long email that detailed how we're going to do this. The expectation will still be that they will complete the hours that they were expected to complete, but there will be no housing stipend, which we usually give a housing allowance. So we won't be awarding that. So we will be saving the institution some money there. And we also are, well, I say we, I don't believe this is going to happen, but the administration seems to be under the aberration that we're going to be able to reopen by the end of June, and is going to allow students who need to do research in the labs specifically to come back and do that work between June 29th and July 31st. And for those students, I will arrange some sort of prorated housing deal. If that happens, they have to tell me now whether or not that's something that they intend to do. And so far, the response from the faculty has been all positive. I haven't had anybody pull out yet. But I did have to spend half an hour on a Google chat this morning with our payroll person to figure out how we're going to handle all the payroll paperwork virtually, including I-9 verification, which normally has to be done face-to-face and in person. So it's not without obstacles.
Lance, could you tell us what your institution is, please?
Austin College in Sherman, Texas. So a small PUI, about 1,400 students.
Thank you.
Hey folks, so I'm Nicole Snyder at Davidson College, Assistant Dean for Research and Creative Work. So I handle student and faculty research across campus. And I just want to reiterate, we haven't made any official decisions yet, but we're close to this. We've actually put together a paper that'll go out to the faculty, and so it just needs to be approved. But ultimately, what we're looking at is we have decided to go remote with all of our research programs across campus. And we have also decided to withhold housing stipends for students, but to pay them their full amount, and to pay the faculty who are supporting those students their full stipends as well. We withheld the housing for a couple of reasons. We went back and forth on that, but there were some concerns that by giving them a housing stipend that they would actually use that to then move off of their home base, and we don't want to promote that at this point. We want to make sure that, if they're working remote, they're working remote from their home base, and we were worried a little bit about students trying to use that money to come back and live closer to campus and do other things with that in groups. But what I can say is just, and to touch on something that Lydia said, we did actually go out to the faculty and to the students to ask them about what, different options that might be available. And I was really surprised at how many STEM faculty, particularly folks who work in the lab sciences, that were very willing to try to rethink their projects to allow students to have that kind of experience. So I think if you present it as an opportunity and not a loss, and to say, okay, these are, unprecedented times. Is there something that you and your students, might be able to learn that's different? Maybe you're working on modeling, or you're working on computational work or data processing, and how might we be able to use the housing stipends that we're not giving you for housing now to support technology to help with the research? And so by removing the housing stipend, that kind of keeps them in place, but then by allowing them to potentially use that housing stipend as a way to support the new remote work that they might be doing, we felt like that was a way to show our investment in them. So hopefully, not everybody was amenable to this. We have 5 or 6 STEM faculty, or like if they can't be in the lab, then no. And that's unfortunate. Those students will lose those opportunities. But we are trying to look at the student worker model to see if maybe those students could then be doing other things within our department. So we'll see.
So I've been hearing 3 or 4 things at this point. One is because it still impacts our students, and sort of a note that I think I've been hearing very clearly is that there is a flexibility that's going to be required, in particular now, both from the student and the faculty basis. It sounds like with the 4 examples that we heard, we have institutional support to retain it. I would also like to hear from people who are actually having that particular challenge. It's something that they want to do. And I could give myself as sort of an example. Right now, all funds have been returned back to the president. So whatever I have remaining in my budget is now out of my budget, has been reverted back to the central office to compensate for perceived budgetary losses and stuff like that. I am urgently trying to get this off the ground because of the unemployment records. 10 million people have been first-time unemployed over the past 2 weeks. And our students down here in South Florida, where it's mainly a resort, hospitality type of environment, they're gonna have nothing. So, Lance, I appreciate your observation, but there's sort of an urgency. If we don't have some programming, our students are really gonna have no access to employment. And a lot of the work that we try to do is to make sure that they have funding so that, the work they do is more meaningful than being like a Starbucks barista, which is fine. I like Starbucks, but the lab, the library, much more powerful places. Have people been confronted with similar issues of really losing all of their funding or a significant amount of their funding, and how they've gone about sort of trying to facilitate the opportunities if this is still considered of value at their institution?
Dominic Galli, IUPUI. So I'm still waiting for the green light. I've made my case. I've raised a couple of points: the financial hardship, keeping students engaged, making sure they don't drop out. I have gotten support from the Vice Chancellor for Research, who also wrote a long email to be distributed to stakeholders, how important it is to continue with student research in summer. And we have several programs, but one is kind of team-based, and the faculty projects were already approved back in February. So I've gotten back to these faculty members and asked, can your projects be changed in a way for it to be performed remotely? And out of the 12 projects, 1 said no, or they have to postpone it. 10 have responded. Some are completely changing the projects for it to be remotely. Some have just had to make some adjustments. I was actually thrilled hearing back from them, because just these 10 projects alone with 5 to 6 students each is already a big chunk of our summer research. I was really, really excited that they got behind me, because I'm going to use this again as an argument and saying the faculty wants to do it's not just the students, but the faculty is bending over backwards in a sense to change their project so that they can be performed remotely. So these are all arguments I'm going to use. Some of our funding comes from individual academic units, not just from campus administration. I've gotten in touch with the deans, and they said, yes, they want to continue as well when it's based on their own funding.
This is Susan from Grand Valley State University. We've been quite fortunate. We've been able to retain all of our funding. The argument that we're using is a little bit of a non-traditional one. So we're in a healthy financial position for this summer, but the concern is for the next academic year. So probably like a lot of y'all, we're wondering who's going to come back and when they're going to come back. And so that's the argument that we're using, is by keeping students engaged in research, that it really keeps them connected to the institution and to the faculty. And so we've been able to secure funding for more summer employment, so student research virtual assistants, if you will. And I've received a lot of interest from my colleagues in biomedical sciences, chemistry, and biology. And that's not what I expected. I'm more of a humanist, so I expected humanities and social sciences, but folks are interested. Having that discussion about retention has been incredibly powerful. So the other piece that our administration is interested in is talking to the community about what we are doing, because folks are hearing how universities are shut down. They know that we're working virtually, but they're not seeing the good work that we're doing. So there's interest in really talking about undergraduate research as a way in which the community is contributing, or the academic community is contributing.
So I'm Shauna Riley from Northern Kentucky University, and our applications for summer fellowships actually came in after we shut down. So the university is closed. We had some challenges getting signatures, but I mean, our applications came in after we were closed, and we had almost double our usual number. And our STEM folks, our money for the STEM fellowships are protected in that they are endowed fellowships, so we can't give that money back. I'm concerned about some of the money in our budget that we use for the humanities and social science research, because it's, comes from different places for different things. And so that's one of our challenges. Nobody wants to say today that we are not coming back in the summer to do research. And so trying to make awards, I mean, we're not there quite yet. We're still trying to decide what exactly going to happen. But if no one is willing to say, yes, we're going to be open, or no, we're going to be closed, that poses challenges as to how we can award. I have faculty who've said, yes, absolutely, we'll find something that's meaningful for students to do virtually. And I have some that said, this project's not going to work, or this is changing everything and I need to think about it. And others that said just no. And that some of the students said no, like if I can't get in the lab, I'm not interested, which is completely fair. And we'll give every student and faculty member an out because, in another month, this could wear very thin. But how do we award anything not knowing when we can come back? If we can come back, and we don't want to punish anyone who can't get back in their labs by not giving them summer funding, and so in our institution, I'd like someone to make an announcement and tell me what I can do. That seems to be the biggest challenge, because no one wants to say no. And so by not saying no, we're not saying yes either.
Shauna, one thing that I did is if students felt that they didn't want to continue on with this summer for whatever reason, or the faculty mentor decided that the project just wasn't viable to do in this awkward virtual/hybrid fashion, that as long as the student isn't graduating next May, they would get priority for our program next summer.
Okay.
Two questions. One is, the institutions that are going forward, what have you all decided about summer school? And the other question is, what are you doing? Well, actually, I have three questions. What are you doing about international students who need to stay in the United States and not go back to their country of origin? And third, have you run across the counter argument that it is inequitable to go forward remotely because so many students in the lab sciences, for example, won't have access to this opportunity?
Well, we canceled summer session yesterday. So all of our classes for both summer sessions are now canceled unless they're online. So face-to-face has been canceled. As far as international students, I wish we had that problem. Unfortunately, we don't have many. But the last issue about equitability is an interesting one. And I'm surprised that I haven't had more pushback from faculty in the hard sciences who are doing lab work about that. They're by and large, they've been quite enthusiastic about trying to figure out a way to make this work so they can get some work done this summer, even if it isn't in the lab. Now, I have a couple of people who are doing lab research with animals, the way Billy does, I know. And for those are the ones where I'm having the issues. It's just not going to happen.
Well,
At University of the Pacific, at University of the Pacific, we put all of our summer sessions online. So, and we just created this, everything that moved online in the spring didn't have to go through the formal online approval to show the curriculum is taught well. And we've just extended that through summer. And I think accreditation agencies are going to allow that. And our international students, we have a few still in our residence halls, but that's about it. And we haven't had the issue about equity. At least it hasn't been raised to my office yet.
And we brought in the statement about equity to not only include disciplinary, but also access to virtual environments, technological tools. Have schools started to address those issues? Because we're discovering about a 5 to 10% real problem getting internet. And we're getting dropout from students who just don't attend class anymore because they can't get access to some of the free hotspots that are available, or they don't have the technology necessary to support. Are there schools that have figured out or have strategies now to support those students if they're in a different discipline or they can't get the technological access?
So I would say for my institution at Austin College, I want to answer Margaret's question first.
Yeah.
Which is that our summer program has some institutional funds that are used for supplies. And right now we're operating under the assumption that if people aren't working in the lab, they're not burning through chemicals, disposables, and things like that. And so those supply funds are being reimagined for faculty and students participating in the summer program for technology. To allow students to have some better access. Up until, and hopefully that's how we're trying to deal with that equity issue. I don't know how successful it's going to be because we're just now exploring it this week. As for the more general thing this semester, as I said the other day, our campus currently is open. Low density students can be here. So the international students are here. Students who can't get access to internet at home are here. There is, we have our own sort of tape on the floor, physical distancing, I hate that term, physical distancing in the cafeteria, all those kinds of things that we're trying to promote healthy behaviors. But again, we are blessed at the moment of being in a county where there are less than 10 cases. And as long as our students aren't moving around and leaving campus, the institution's approach is that this is fairly safe here. However, the decision that was handed to me this week saying that no students for summer research can be on campus, I suspect is leading to a cancellation of our summer programs, a shutting down of all the dorms and the physical spaces this summer. And I don't know what the decision is moving forward at that point. Should we identify this spring that we have a lot of students that are in the situation that exactly what you're describing, Billy, where they don't have access to the computers, they don't have access to the internet, and that it's causing them to not be retained. Our institutional technology did pull a lot of computer lab computers, send them with students. Our IT has been really good about helping students make sure that they have access, even if they just are here on campus because they need the Wi-Fi, but they still didn't have a laptop, so they could work more safely from their rooms. IT bought a bunch of headphones and are selling them like super cheap and things like that to help the students. And so, we've invested quite a bit in our infrastructure, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. Like, we still have a lot of software and things like that. They're only accessible on campus, and we have not traditionally allowed students to have VPN access or anything like that. And these are issues that I'm still fighting with, and we're still trying to find solutions to.
This is Dee Sams, Georgia College and State University. I'm the faculty coordinator for the Mentored Undergraduate Research and Creative Endeavors office. That's a big mouthful. We have given all of our supplies to the state of Georgia. No gloves, no defibrillators, no nothing. So going through the full summer, it would be impossible to have anyone on campus, even if the virus cleared up. And it will impact us even getting new supplies when we reopen in August because of the depletion. So we're at a thing of how can we be equitable to the sciences if we can't provide anything on campus. So like you all said about changing to something else. However, I fear that that's going to cause some angst among our science faculty, and we're trying to figure out what we can do right now. I've been taking some notes on what you've been saying, but I'd really like to know, some good wording that we can use to keep from alienating anyone based on the fact that we just can't do it. We also heard from our IRB, we are not permitted to have any human contact research. And so our social sciences people will also lose out in that. So we're kind of we're in Georgia where we're shut down now officially. I know we were one of the last ones, but we don't have any supplies left. And a lot of our funding has been given back to the state. Any thoughts would be appreciated.
So there were a number of things there. What about that thought about how to engage faculty and how to sort of make sure that we're being as disciplinarily equitable as possible? People come up with ways to talk through the issues because we're all limited by our imagination. This is a striking thing, unparalleled. So what are some approaches people have talked with their faculty who want to, but may not know how to adjust in this era?
So we're starting that conversation, and I had to have a couple of those conversations just in reaching out to ask faculty what they could do in terms of reimagining their own research efforts with students, at least with regards to the summer. And it can be a difficult conversation, but I find sometimes giving them a couple of examples helps, right? So, and I pulled those examples, you know, both from experiences within STEM, but then also in the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts, and ways. And I've asked faculty to share with me, you know, things that they're doing so that I can provide even more examples that may be more discipline specific. And so I think sometimes just by giving someone kind of an example, it may not be what they go with, but it gets the wheels turning, right? It's like, oh, if somebody else can think about a way to move in this direction, maybe I can. And the other part that we've been trying to do is we do have some support through what we call faculty study and research grants, and trying to loosen the restrictions on those to help faculty to retrain too in areas that they might be able to utilize to be able to work remotely with their students. And so for some folks, for some faculty, the concern is just trying to learn something new in a new environment, right? And so providing monies for them to be able to engage with the broader community in ways that are meaningful for them in order to get new resources to work with their students remotely, I think has been very, very helpful. So it's really about allowing folks to advocate for themselves, but then trying where we can to provide small resources for them to be able to make that transition, because it lowers the activation energy barrier a little bit. Sorry, I'm kind of, but I think it really does help. It really helps faculty to rethink it. So I know just giving somebody an idea who is completely opposed to this has already led to them saying, well, what if I did this? Could you give me, you know, a couple $100 to be able to buy this kind of software to be able to work with my students, right? I think that's a reasonable thing, right, to try to help in this age. So.
Doran, one of the things that we've been doing on our campus is exactly what we're doing here. Bringing in faculty together and asking them some questions. It typically starts with my faculty in terms of frustration and venting. And honestly, I totally get that. Let them just be angry, let them be annoyed by the situation. But I would say after a few minutes, it becomes really productive. And one of the great things about it is they hear each other and they create ideas based on something that someone else has started to think through. So it's not that I have answers, because I normally don't, but just that format of other people sort of playing around with ideas helps them sort of confront the challenges in a way that allows them to engage students more effectively and come up with ideas. Have other people had some strategies? Because it's a great, great question.
I popped into the chat that we're hosting interdisciplinary conversations. So this kind of goes along the train of thought folks have, where the disciplines can share techniques that might be outside their comfort zone. The other thing that I've noticed is our faculty want to talk with each other more. Usually during the summer, folks go and kind of do their own things, and they'll come back at certain points when required. But they want to talk more often. And so we're really looking at establishing a more consistent and stable virtual community for faculty to talk about what's working, what's not working. How are you assessing what your students doing? Those types of questions. So they can create a community to support one another, because I certainly don't have the answers, especially for my colleagues in the sciences and STEM disciplines, but they have insight for one another. And I think also normalizing the struggle is helpful. I don't know what it was like for y'all on your campuses, but when we went online, a lot of my faculty colleagues were isolated and thinking that they were struggling by themselves. And so we're trying to shift that a little bit. So if we're going to struggle, we're all going to struggle together. And that seems to be working really, really well.
Lance, I saw you post in the chat about your Faculty Development Center. Can you talk about what they're doing?
They're hosting these open Zoom sessions every Tuesday and Thursday. And so they have a member of IT and a faculty member who is more in media studies, who's more technologically sound. He does a lot with media. He's our esports coach, that kind of stuff. And so you can go into a breakout room if you have sort of technical, logistical questions with either an IT specialist or with someone who has a little bit more specialization in remote work. And then they're just holding these open sessions where there's usually a question or a theme or a short presentation by somebody. Like today's is our writing intensive curriculum. How are faculty, still managing to meet those student learning outcomes while doing remote teaching? And so there's supposed to be like a 10 or 15 minute presentation about by one faculty member or two faculty members on their ideas. And then it's just open discussion, sharing ideas, asking questions, opportunity for the host to pop some people into a breakout room if they want to go into a smaller conversation, that kind of stuff. So this is the first, last week was all about sort of the technical side of things. This is the first week where we're really getting into that sort of more intellectual support network that Susan talked about for the faculty.
Other questions or observations?
Hi, this is Margaret. I'm from Brandon, Massachusetts, and we're all shut down. Next question. We're in a situation, same as Shauna's institution, of we have a lot of applications that were submitted after our university closed, and they're kind of in a holding pattern, and together with a number of transitions leads us to kind of this state of ambiguity. There has been no directives from the higher leadership about what is happening in the summer. And so I'd love to hear what other people, other institutions have done if they've had a period of ambiguity where the leadership has not decided on what is going to happen. So we don't know, is summer research going to happen? Are courses going to happen? And we have piles of applications in our office. So I'd love to hear from other people about what they're doing, if they went through that period themselves before it was resolved.
We were told to just, while we await their decision, to go forward as if it was going to go ahead. And then when I anticipate they're going to say, we're not going to be doing this, and then we'll tell everybody we're not doing it. But it leaves students and faculty in sort of a tenuous position. But these are the uncertain times in which we live. And does anybody have an institution in which the leadership has said, we're not going forward with summer research?
At this point in time, that is our case, but it's because the funding has been taken back by the institution. Obviously, people could do it on a voluntary basis virtually, but we're in a situation right now where I cannot support it. Hopefully that will change. Anyone else?
Only for international. We cut all international, but we also did cut some domestic projects, like the Davis Peace Prize, but that's partly because those external folks cut the programs themselves, right? So some domestic programs have been cut. I'm hearing a lot from students that their programs have been canceled. So students who are trying to do any sort of biomedical research, they're just being told, sorry, you were a wonderful applicant, but unfortunately, things have changed and we're unable to offer you the position. So I think a lot of our students are actually coming back to Davidson and looking at what we might be able to offer them now that they're learning that these other high impact experiential learning opportunities have been canceled. And the other thing is that folks that are doing sustainability type research or civic engagement as part of their intellectual work are also finding that a lot of these nonprofits are also saying, no, we can't even support our own people right now, because there's an economic component to this too, where many of these organizations are actually just laying off regular employees, and it's hard for them to actually rationalize whether they could support it or not, bringing in, an intern without being able to even pay their own employees. So we're hearing a lot of this, and I think external factors are making the decisions easier in some ways for the students and for us, but then we're getting that pushback from the students of what can Davidson offer. And so one thing that I would just like to point out is that something that we're doing is going out to our alumni, right? So active alumni that are involved, to see if they have any opportunities that students might be able to do with them remotely. You're just kind of thinking outside the box for people who may or may not want to help. I know that different alumni networks are different at different institutions, but we do have a strong alumni network, and we're trying to use that network to try to partner with our students who have lost those opportunities to be able to give them. But there are some programs that we're looking at. So we're basically saying that if the student truly cannot do the project remote from their home, the answer is no, right? That type of opportunity does get canceled, even if it's, because we've had questions about field work. Well, my student will be out in the field by themselves, counting birds or whatever. And the answer is no, unfortunately, right? They have to be able to actually do it remotely, no travel. So I guess you could say it's kind of 50-50. There is a cancellation, but it's only if that person can't move that research completely remote.
Other observations to either of the questions? Transitioning through that period of ambiguity or dealing with cancellations?
Yeah, what she just said though is what we're dealing with. Should we even offer anything if we're going to exclude the sciences who have to have equipment or can't be in the field? Is it fair is our question, I guess, to give it to others. They've already been through a peer reviewed process. We know who will qualify and who won't, but we're just hanging on hold, kind of waiting to get through this to see what we can do to move forward. But we don't want to be perceived as favoring others. I understand the letter saying if you can't move it from to where it's online or at home, but it still kind of has that feeling of we're excluding somebody. I don't know.
We had that conversation, and I think what we ultimately decided in the end is that, you know, again, these are unprecedented times, and there is certainly going to be an equity issue. No matter what we do, there's going to be an equity issue, because if you cancel everything, you're going to put some people at a disadvantage more than others just by the nature of them not having an experience altogether. And what we decided to do was to try to allow people to think creatively. Don't take these opportunities off the table, but make sure that, if there's a way that you can connect it, even if it's a literature review, even if the student is working from home and doing something as simple as a literature review, we offer the opportunity. And we recognize that that is not the same as an on-campus experience in a laboratory setting, for example, in STEM. But we are allowing folks to be creative, and so that these students don't lose these opportunities. So if a STEM faculty really doesn't want to work with their student on a literature review, which would be kind of a different kind of opportunity than, say, doing computational work or big data type work, right? Which we see some of our folks doing. And moving towards, then we understand that too. And I think the other thing is not to marginalize the faculty or students who really can't be able to do their work, but that shouldn't preclude the other students from being able to then engage, right? So we want to be understanding. If you're telling me that you can't move your research into a remote setting, that's okay. There's no penalty there for you. There's no penalty there for the student. And we need to make sure that we do let faculty know that this is not going to be held against them in a review process, right? Because there is a concern, particularly for junior faculty, that if they're not out there doing this and they really cannot move their research to a remote setting, that then they are that then they're at some sort of disadvantage during the review process. But on the other hand, we don't want to take experiences away from folks who can be creative during this time and do some really interesting work. We look at it as an opportunity. What we learn from this may be very important for the future, right? Maybe even the fall. Maybe 5 years from now. And so we want to see what our faculty and students can do and what ways they can innovate that the rest of us can potentially learn from. So yes, but no matter what you do, there will be an inequity, no matter what you do.
Nicole, at your university, have they talked about pausing the tenure clock or anything like that for folks who are in that situation who may not get to mentor students this summer or have to suspend their research because of that?
I think that we haven't really had those conversations just yet, but they're coming down the line. We focused first on student evaluations for the spring semester, and we basically are allowing faculty to advocate for themselves. They can count it or they don't have to, because some faculty are doing some pretty innovative work and may want the dean to see what they've done in terms of stepping up during this time, right? The committee, and some people may be like, this is so new for me and I really had trouble adjusting. I'd rather not share those evaluations. So we let folks do that. But I think that those conversations are ongoing about whether or not people would want to do that. I don't think they're gonna make it mandatory. Nothing's off the table right now. And I think we are still in triage mode. I think those conversations are gonna be coming down the line once this semester is over and we're kind of reaching at least what is our new normal.
This observation is probably one of the most important thing for all of us. The senior leadership at each of our institutions is dealing with the biggest picture. In many ways, what we're dealing with is the next steps, and we're also recognizing where those particular challenges are. We have a real responsibility to sort of keep track of those, and then as we're sort of thinking through them, provide the advice, the insight that can help address those points, whether it be individual within the tenure track in interrupted state, whether it be issues that show up in terms of equity. If we don't have to stop as much as we definitely really need to be fostering as much creativity and tracking where the different binds and barriers end up being. Because the presidents and provosts, they don't have the time to be thinking through those issues.
We have on our campus right now, the policy is that faculty have the option to delay tenure by 1 year. So they can take it or leave it depending on their individual situation. That's official.
Good.
One of the questions that came up in the chat is from Catherine asking about, for those of us who are moving forward, how are our programs being restructured? Which is a fabulous question, because that's a discussion that we've had a lot, at least in our office. We're starting to strip down our summer programs and thinking about what is really essential. What do our students really, really need to enhance their learning, and what additional skills might they need? So that might be not to shift the conversation at all, Billy, but that might be where folks want some additional feedback. Or have folks gotten that far yet? We might not be there yet to think about summer programs. I see some heads shaking like, no, Susan, we're not there yet.
I'm Joan Durso from Duke, and I'm from a department at Duke, not from the research undergraduate office. What we're dealing with is suddenly trying to accommodate a lot of students who had research opportunities and or who had internships and jobs, who are typically funded externally to the department. We're trying to scramble to figure out how do we accommodate work study if that's a possibility, because our programs are well funded, very selective. Not everybody can get in, and suddenly there's a huge need beyond what we normally have to do. And many of the opportunities that were off campus or abroad are of course gone now. So I think a third level down is how departments in institutions, even those that are admittedly well funded, are scrambling to accommodate needs that we haven't seen before. So I love the framework that you laid out shortly ago, and want to sort of delve into that and looking for ways we can adapt existing structures like the application process that's used for undergraduate research projects and that sort of thing, to make it simple, because we have to have equity. We want to be transparent and let everyone apply. We'd like to take into consideration the financial constraints that the students may be facing that may be suddenly different. It's a big puzzle. So, and this is stuff we haven't had to deal with before at the departmental level.
At Williams College, we're dealing with the same kind of issue of like, how do we fund a group of students? And so what we've done is we started working with alumni affairs, and we've kind of focused on those funds that are endowed that only can be used in a certain way, and going out to those donors and saying, can we reappropriate those funds so that we can use it to help students, the broad array of students who have needs, who had an internship, who had a peace fellowship, who had whatever, and do not have it, because on the back end, we will have to pay for it later with financial aid, because their summer earnings is part of their financial aid package. So just really think creatively about how can we support students right now financially so that they can move forward.
Well, there's also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay, there's also this loss of face. We had students going to 4 major conferences in March. Okay, the conferences gave them back their registration fee, but they booked airline tickets, obviously, because every conference kept saying, we're going to happen, we're going to happen, we're going to happen. Well, now we have students stuck with airline tickets. We approved them up to $500, but if they didn't go to the conference, the angst here is coming is, do we refund or not? My thoughts are we do, but I'm not at the top level who's saying, well, let's think about this. I mean, we even had difficulty getting the money back on study abroad. So I'm worried about how it's going to look moving forward if we don't do something equitable to the students who have lost money because of this. And people say, oh, they'll get a ticket to use. Well, part of them are graduating and they have no intention of going anywhere, and the airlines aren't giving you very much time to go anyway. So do we want to harm our programs by closing down summer research or not funding things that didn't happen outside the students' purview?
As far as the travel's concerned, what I did at my institution, Christopher Newport, is if students laid out money ahead of time, which for some reason they could not get back, we are reimbursing them for that. For example, I have a student who was supposed to fly to Jacksonville, Florida for a conference. The conference obviously was canceled. We have a travel restriction. It's a non-transferable, non-refundable ticket. And so she was able to get points back for herself to fly in the future. She graduates next month. So it's not going to do us any good, but I'm reimbursing her for the cost of the ticket. But the number of cases like that is relatively small, I have to admit.
We're looking at probably close to 60, 70 students.
Yeah, I had 90 students whose conference travel was canceled when we put in our travel restriction, but luckily most of them were far enough out that they hadn't made those kinds of plans yet.
Just a quick thing, those of you that have lost money towards travel expenses, and we did too. I run an international program this summer, and we're out almost $10,000 in that program alone, right? We're holding on to the airline tickets right now because we are hoping that the airlines will cancel and we'll get the money back, right? And so those flights weren't to be taken apart until June, but some of those were refundable and some of them were not. It's a long story. Nevertheless, Davidson has set up a special account where they're keeping track of all of these losses, because they do think that there may be something that comes forward in terms of write-offs for these types of expenses that were incurred where the money was not able to be reclaimed. So we've been trying to keep track of all of that. Maybe it will not be, maybe it will be, but as an institution, if you can manage that, then there may be an opportunity for you to recuperate some of those funds in the long run due to this COVID-19. Because yeah, we're probably going to have close to, I'm guessing, $100,000 in the end between faculty and student losses, and we're hoping to at some point recuperate some of that. But if you haven't, if you have something that's coming up for the summer, a student was taking part in a summer opportunity and they've got flights or something like that, maybe hold on to it, because if the airline cancels it itself, right, then you have the ability to potentially get a refund for that. So rather than fighting with them and trying to cancel it on your end and losing it, there may be a chance to recuperate some of those funds. So just a thought.
So in our last maybe 5-10 minutes, what, if anything, are you guys starting to develop and design in terms of helping people avoid burnout? Students, the faculty, your colleagues, yourself. I cannot speak for you, but my life individually has become much more anxious, much busier than it was beforehand. And I didn't think that was honestly possible. But it is insane. When we've been meeting here, I'm getting pinged for meetings that start in 9 minutes that just were announced 20 minutes ago. So this is sort of the state where we're at. What things are you able to do to help your community sort of provide some balance through this experience? What sort of things are you able to do for yourself to provide some balance through this experience? Because you are challenged. We try to do things, and I think it was beautifully said by Margaret earlier, we're stuck in so many points of ambiguity. And that's a very tough position to be in as you try to prepare, you try to plan, you try to implement, you try to create. What sort of things are you doing for the community?
I really appreciate that question, Billy, and you're always so thoughtful about what are we doing for ourselves as well. And I'm the first to admit that I'm horrible in the self-care thing. All you gotta do is look at me, you know that. If anybody's hung around with me, you know that. But I in 8 minutes, I'm starting a Zoom conference call with my 70 research apprentices. So just I think the most important thing for folks right now is getting good information, whether they're students or colleagues. I know that one of the things that was frustrating on our campus in the 2 weeks that led up to this was the silence from the administration and people wondering what the hell's going on? When are they going to make a decision? And I still think that every institution should be issuing a daily email, even if it just says, everything is copacetic, the way the governors are doing. But some are, some aren't. We get daily emails, but they're not regular.
I think one way that we're trying to adjust our programs is we have a very long on-ramp. So in our programs, we have deadlines for individualized development plans, research plans. Things are generally due towards the end of April, and we scrapped all that. And we are telling our faculty those first 2 weeks when y'all would be, you know, getting everything together, you and your student researchers would be launching. We want you to breathe, and we want you to take your time kind of moving into the next sequence, because no one's had a break. Like I hope tomorrow's Saturday, but I know it's not. So for my colleagues, I want them to slow down, and I want them to realize they don't have to be perfect. And I think that's, I don't take that advice well. I don't assume my colleagues do, but giving them a longer on-ramp into research, I think will be a little helpful in providing a little bit of balance.
I think those are really great suggestions. And one thing that I've done this semester and will likely do this summer is I've scheduled, you know, regular meetings with students. We have a regular department meeting that we're working into, and we spend portions of that not even talking about work, right? Just talking about how we're doing, what we're doing, sharing success stories. We started in an email string yesterday where people posted pictures around their house and around their yards and what they're doing outside of the teaching. And it was really nice. You know, people had pictures of the garden. Somebody just had a bunch of chickens that were born, little chicks. And little things like that can brighten your day. And I did the same thing with my students too. So I basically told them, we have a Zoom meeting, show up with your favorite legal beverage, and let's just talk. Let's just be in the same space together. And we didn't talk about research. We didn't talk about chemistry. We just talked. We talked about what folks were doing. They showed us around their room virtually, you know, introduced us to their parents who was, you know, cooking in the background. And believe it or not, that just helped to create a little bit of normalcy, a little bit of community, and little tiny things like that can go a very, very long way to achieving a new normal. And so if you have the opportunity to do that, sometimes it's enough to just step back and not talk about work, but just talk about how we can help each other, what we're doing each day to make our, you know, to make this work for us. And so I found that was one of the highlights of my week last week, was that meeting. And we never talked at all about anything that we were doing in the lab, not once.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you guys are rock stars. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. There is another discussion on Monday in terms of virtual research, creative, and scholarly works, where maybe there will be opportunities to sort of discuss different ways in which people have done some of the projects. And then I saw in the chat there's a request for learning outcomes and sort of tracking, and we can obviously do that. As per usual, the list goes up. We try to limit the conversations. If there is a desire to participate, but you don't initially sign up through the form stack, just email me offline. I'll add you to it. We try to keep the conversations at around 30-ish or so people have the opportunity to ask questions and talk. But obviously we don't want to also exclude, especially if you've been really trying to develop these ideas and been participating previously. Sound good? Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend. Do something joyous.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks so much. This was really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. You all take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So I'm going to try to save the chat. Have you ever done this before?
I haven't. You're the expert.
We are in real problems.
You're the expert. I have to ask you questions about how this stuff works.
It worked. I saved it. Okay, so I'm going to knock the other guys off.
Do we want to keep Robin on for a minute?
If she is there, yes. Yes, that's a good point. And I hope I'm not going to be removing the wrong people. Hey, Robin, you there, buddy?
She might have us.
But I'm going to stop the recording.